Hey everybody, welcome to the Irresistible Brand Podcast. I am Matt Deutschman. I'm the owner of Doubletake Promotional Marketing. And since 2010, we've been helping colleges and universities and corporations in various industries with promotional products and branded merchandise. And over the years, the four key strategic initiatives we typically support with promotional products are client appreciation, referral generation, employee engagement and retention, and recruiting and onboarding. Companies that execute these four areas well develop an irresistible brand, which clients can't help but refer to others, employees can't help but promote, and recruits can't wait to join. Thus, the Irresistible Brand Podcast, where I talk with other leaders in those key strategic areas. So I am really excited to be talking today with Megan Robinson of the E-Leader Experience. She works with individuals and teams to develop self-leadership skills that grow companies. She started her career in marketing, climbing her way through the corporate ladder at advertising agencies and Fortune 500 companies. Like many of us, she caught the entrepreneur bug and started her own marketing company. After yet another business therapy session, Megan discovered her true passion was in coaching and is a John Maxwell certified coach. I love John Maxwell, by the way, just a side note. And she's a disc trainer. In addition, she is the president of the Association for Talent Development Chicago, the leading learning and development organization in Chicagoland. Inspired by her own successful career in corporate and entrepreneurial environments, Megan makes leadership approachable for everyone, regardless of title, position, or experience. And I think that's hugely important. Megan, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt. I'm really excited about this conversation. As you know, employee engagement and just really that employee experience is so important to the work that I do and how I work with organizations.
Absolutely. And I think, it's timely right now. And of those four categories, the areas that you're most, closely knitted to are employee engagement and retention and recruiting and onboarding. And we're in an employees market right now from a hiring standpoint and from a retention standpoint. So can you just talk a little bit about that and what companies need to do right now to stand out in the talent market, and what maybe you've seen some of your clients or some employers doing to offer things to employees that are unique and different?
Yeah. I think it's really aggressive out there. And I hear time and time again how employers are just struggling to find that really great talent that aligns and are engaged and excited. And they might even find someone and then lose them right at the last minute for whatever reason. And we've seen companies really give more titles out or give more money out as kind of that way to retain their talent. And it doesn't really work. Frankly, I really find that the next benefit that employees are looking for, and frankly, employers are able to give, is that professional development, is that growth opportunity, especially when we look at generations in the workplace and younger or millennial generations. They've been really trained, if you're not moving forward, you've got to move on. And providing those opportunities for someone that aren't just vanity titles and truly development is what really keeps their employees engaged with the mission of the organization and the vision of it, so that they're able to show up. And I'm a big believer of leadership, obviously, as are you with John Maxwell, but really honing that leadership ability and moving from that box checking behavior where they're always looking for the next step, always looking for what's happening, into leadership and creating their own boxes, is where organizations start to really tap that talent pool and really grow at a different level, at a different rate when they start to nurture it. So I see a huge gap in great leadership. I think the last 18 months has taught us all what good leadership looks like or doesn't look like, and really how to develop it. Because, a while ago, everybody had manager training programs, and those high potentials and high performers learned what it meant to be a manager. And we just don't have that anymore. A lot of organizations, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, there's a lot to unpack from what you just said. And like right off the bat, one of the key things that I think that, that caught me, you said that, that even the financial benefits that companies are giving their employees are not necessarily outweighed by the opportunities for professional development and growth. So it's not even money. It's not money necessarily as the driving, motivating factor for an employee to be, a loyal, committed member of an organization. Is that what you're seeing? That it's the growth opportunities that are the driving force?
It's the what are you doing for them and what are they doing for you? It's really that symbiotic relationship. And I've seen a huge trend, and I know you tap into this a lot, of what that culture looks like. How does that organization share their values and mission and really support the growth of the individual so that they feel aligned and committed to that cause? But growth and development is always a priority. And especially when you're looking at that top talent, they want to be growing. That's what makes them a top talent. And so finding companies that are supporting that growth and encouraging it really starts to attract it, because more dollars, I mean, that's great, but it doesn't really satisfy some of those deeper needs. And I think, okay.
I'm sorry. So are you saying that, we mentioned John Maxwell and the fact that you're a disc trainer and things like, are employees looking for that type of training coming from within their company? Are they valuing that, or are those kind of like eye rolling activities when they have these like sessions, leadership training sessions, or are you seeing that when companies employ those kind of programs, that's getting huge buy-in from teams?
It depends on the organization, depends on how it's done. I mean, I think we can all roll our eyes at some really bad trainings that we've had, the bad presentations, yet another webinar. Like, no one has time for that. Like, not worth my energy. Now I have to go to another thing. It's not engaging or exciting. So you see a lot of shift happening on how they're offering it, or what the talent development industry looks like, or what learning practitioners are expected to deliver. So you see a lot of the micro learnings. You see huge industry, online, I'm saying Udemy as an example of just explosion and growth, where people are looking to build new skills. They're looking to find what's next. They're interested in learning, and how an organization doesn't force someone to, but supports them on their individual path. That's where you find that connection. And I think we've really moved from this one-to-many communication with organizations into a one-on-one conversation. So it is the managers, it is the leaders, it's how they're connecting with the team that makes the difference. I mean, we've all had the bad managers, and I love the quote, most people don't leave their jobs because of the job, they leave it because they leave the manager.
Yeah.
And
statistics back that up too. It shows that people, I think the number one reason people leave their jobs, and probably a majority of reason, is for, disliking their direct, boss. So
that into the culture so much. And when you look at the engagement, or how someone's getting onboarded in that process, and how you inspire what it means to be part of that organization, or what the leadership feels for it, that's that first foyer into creating that culture of development, into creating that culture of inclusion, into really inspiring the team to want to be there. So when you're attracting that talent, or when you're onboarding them, or even just keeping them engaged, that living, breathing organism of the company culture is so critical to keeping it going, because like you said, more money or more this isn't necessarily what's going to inspire them anymore.
Sure. So how do brands and how do businesses communicate the overall mission of the company, and what does that mean? Can we unpack that a little bit? Like, what's a company's, a company might say our mission is to, to serve our clients, or our mission is to, to grow the business. Like, how does a company communicate its mission in a way that is deeper than just, top line, bottom line? And how does a business use its mission to inspire its recruits to want to become a team member, and then inspire its team members to be engaged and advocating for the brand while they're a member of the team?
Yeah, I think there's so many different words to unpack there. And everyone has a different definition for it. So you've got mission, you've got vision, you've got goals in there, you've got values. All of that is what's creating that culture. And so I was actually chatting with a client the other day just on building that vision for their company, building what is that mission that we're on? What does it look like? And leaning into that balance of what are the goals that we have? How can we align the team to really clarify what their goals is so that they are contributing to it at all levels, to what are the values? And I call them really the guardrails around it. So how are we acting? How are the values really dictating if we're on track or off track? And going to more that cultural aspect of how you achieve that vision or that goal. And so communicating it is always the hardest part. And doing it with authenticity and consistency, I will say, is the most important thing, because no one wants to hear, this is the flavor of the week and this is what our vision is today. And then 3 months later, it's shifted and we're doing something else. You've got to have something that keeps that momentum and keeps that consistency. You can have different goals. That's fine if you need to change it. But having the values and the culture that holds steady through it, that's what creates the momentum. And that's what keeps that alignment with it, because you're able to see if that goal or that vision is not aligned with the values.
Sure.
I use it for conversations all the time. How does that apply to this? Or how do your values show up in this goal? Or how did your team show up with these values in this meeting? And bringing it back to that consistency aspect is where you really build an intentional culture. And that's where you really drive that engagement consistently.
I think, yeah. And in our scope of business, when we talk about irresistible brands, people sometimes think your brand is your logo, your graphics, what your website looks like. That's your brand. And that's not the case at all. Your brand is everything. It's every way that you look, that you come across, that you feel, the way that you impact or interact with everyone with whom you come in contact. So, like you said, it's the communication of the vision in an authentic way that is the brand. It's what does your brand stand for, and then every other way that you are touching people, with all the five senses, that's the way that the brand is permeated. And so culture is something that's tough to put your finger on, but it's unmistakable when it's positive, and it's
unmistakable when it's negative.
True. Yeah. And that's why, like, the fit it's a feel thing, it's not something that you can see or that, you can read about. It's feel. And
well, it's that okay or not okay. I feel comfortable. I don't feel comfortable. And having the confidence a little bit to make sure that you do contribute to that culture so that you do feel comfortable there, that you do feel confident there. That, to me, is the self-leadership, right? That's how you're showing up and you're aligning. Here are my values. Here's my vision. And here's how it combines with the organization. Or here's how it's not aligned. How can we come to the table and make sure that we keep that alignment together? Because it is a lot. I mean, I see people leave companies all the time because it wasn't a good fit, right? Mm-hmm. The culture wasn't right. And I look at them, I say, how did you create your own culture? How did you contribute to that culture? Because I guarantee you, there's going to be challenges at every culture and every company you work with. And if you're not willing to change your behavior and to show up and create a culture that you're comfortable with and contribute to it positively, you're going to create the exact same situation. And what I really loved you saying is that, that culture or that brand is everything. I'm going to challenge and say that brand is the influence, right? Your company, if you have an irresistible brand, you are influencing everyone around you. You're influencing your team. You're influencing clients. You're influencing the market. That is irresistible. And that influence, and you know where I'm going with this, is leadership. Because John Maxwell does really define leadership as influence. Nothing more, nothing less. So creating irresistible brand means being a leader.
Love that. And so you mentioned self-leadership. So can you define self-leadership in that context of influence?
Yeah. Self-leadership is really influencing yourself and being intentional yourself so that you can influence others. So when you make a decision, when you decide how you want to communicate something, when you take responsibility for your actions, and I'd like to go to Stephen Covey's circle of control, circle of influence, 7 habits of highly effective people, and really looking at that circle of control of what are the things that you can do. What do you have 100%, 1,000% autonomy over, and you can change if you want to change. And that right there is that start of self-leadership, right? You can change how you show up for a pitch meeting, how prepared you are. You can't change whether or not the client buys from you, right? You can decide what shirt you're going to wear for that day, what time you arrive for work. There's a lot of things within your control. There's a lot of things outside of it. But when you start to really take control over the things that are within your ability and scope, it expands your circle of influence. And that's where that self-leadership really has a lot of power, because if you're guiding yourself and if you're leading yourself intentionally, everyone's going to notice that. And that's how you're showing up different for an organization's culture.
And would you say that they're recognizing the limitations is also a key part of it, right? Recognizing what is not within your control. That's part of self-leadership. You have to understand the boundaries. You used the term guardrails earlier when it comes to culture, but that's what you have to understand, and not attempting to control something that's outside the bounds of that. That's also the mark of a good leader in that respect.
1,000,000%. When they're working in a reality and a framework that is within their scope, that's fantastic. But I think we've all seen the micromanagers, the people that try to expand beyond what their control is. Nobody wants to be on that team. That's not a culture. I mean, everyone wants to take responsibility and accountability. But when you look at and really define what you can and can't do, one, you're going to be a lot happier because you're not trying to control things that are outside of that power, but your team is, and you respect them in a different way because you understand, I can't force you to do something. I can't I can put, punishments around it, but that's not going to actually change your behavior. Someone is really responsible for their own, and giving yourself a little bit of that distance helps quite a bit in a lot of situations.
Sure.
And understand it.
So I want to switch gears. I want to talk about millennials for a second. Okay. You use that term. It's a term that, I mean, it's been around now for more than a decade in the business climate. I'm 35. I'm an old millennial. All millennials are not made the same. There's millennials who never, who remember what it was like to live without cell phones in your pocket, like myself. There's millennials who don't really have an experience without a cell phone in their pocket, right? So, I feel like over the years that the term, and this is probably the case with every generation, that people kind of on the extreme ends of any generation feel like, well, I'm not anything similar to those people. You can't use that to paint with such a broad brush. It's interesting how we've been seeing all these tips and all these best practices of how to reach the millennial generation and how to engage millennials in the workplace. Now that millennials are such a dominant force in the workplace and in the workforce, and you can call it emerging leaders, but many millennials are firmly entrenched in leadership at this point. What's your experience with approaching the millennial generation from a leadership development standpoint? Is it any different than any other generation? Is there any, gimmick or tip or anything that needs to be part of a communication strategy to the millennial generation? What's your experience in that realm?
I love how you teed that up for me, because I always joke a millennial is just anyone that's younger than you, right? It's just now The flipper. Oh, they must be a millennial. They're younger than me.
And anyone who's older is a boomer, right? So.
Right. Right. I mean, they're just labels that we're putting on it. And I get that question a lot about, generations in the workplace and what do you need to do differently? I think you just need to step up as a better leader, frankly, which is not the answer. It's not a quick fix. It's not a quick win. But when you treat someone else with respect, when you have strong communication skills, when you show up with emotional intelligence and empathy, these are things that don't matter what generation you're in. They're just about human connection. And really looking at what that human experience is and looking at how we're more similar than different. That's what helps communicate or engage or talk about it, or listening to someone. Crazy concept, I know, but listening to what someone tells you that they want. Yes, there are differences and there's nuances of what they need or expectations about it. But just like a different generation, you'd want to listen to what they're thinking or feeling. And so that you can lead them the best that you can. You can have that conversation, that open dialogue of what's reasonable, what's possible, and really exploring that as a human. So I joke self-leadership, I work with a lot of emerging leaders, and I'm with you. I see people from that VP, director, executive level, all the way down to individual contributor. But most people, everyone needs to build that self-leadership skill first.
And so do you find that the communication strategy needs to be any different when working with someone in Gen X or baby boomer generation as opposed to millennial generation? And like we talked about before, the overall mission of the organization being a driving force to build culture and bridge gaps between different, identity groups within a company. Is that consistent regardless the generation that you're dealing with, or is there a nuance to how elements like that need to be communicated?
I think there's probably a shift. I mean, you could say, Gen X or Gen Z or millennials, they want shorter pieces of information, or it needs to be flashier, or it needs to have video content when you look at the channel or how it's communicated. But the core message is still important. So when you look at just communication models and just having that sender, noise, receiver aspect of it, I love the head nod, like, yeah, I know communication theories and models. You're still sending a message. You might have to tweak your message so that it really resonates with the person that's receiving it. But our market has gotten so much noisier, and there is just a competition for attention and distraction unlike any other. And that's, I think, the environment that we're in more than a generational challenge. So understanding what the landscape looks like for the receiver and being kind of that compassionate communicator of understanding, oh, this is how I can meet them. But also getting that feedback loop engaging as well, right? Just because they got the message, what did they hear? What did that sound like to them? And completing the communication feedback loop. That's where you really make sure that you're connecting and aligned. So I think a lot of older generations were very, dictatorship management. This is what I'm saying. Everybody listen and follow. They probably had just as much disengagement and unalignment as we do now. They may not have been vocal about it. They may not have mentioned it. There were still these challenges that were just looked at a little bit differently.
So dull, incoherent, ineffective message delivered in a flashy way is still not gonna land, right?
If there's nothing to relate with and it's not important, we have such strong filters right now for important, not important. What do I need to pay attention to? What do I not? I know I've been guilty of, I'll say, multitasking during a lot of webinar content where I catch myself fading out. And I hope no one's doing it right now where you're actually listening to this. But, having something on one side of the screen and something else on the other, and what you're paying attention to, they're in constant battle. So making sure that you're getting that feedback, making sure that they're repeating what you said, making sure that they are alignment or how it applies to them is really that crux, I think, of effective communication.
Agreed. And I think that's a great place to land this plane, that, the communication has to be delivered clearly and in a way that is resonating with what's important. And leadership, self-leadership, influence is extremely important within organizations and in creating irresistible brands and building culture, and just bridging that gap between different cohort groups within an organization. And so I just want
to, when you said that irresistible brand part, it's not the brand that's irresistible. It's how you connect with that brand that makes it irresistible, because you've got to put yourself in it. And that's what hooks it. That's what makes it exciting and engaging and irresistible in my mind, because I love talking about me. Everyone else loves about talking about them.
Love it. Yeah, it's humanizing it, right? We're all humans. A brand is just composed of humans. That's why it goes beyond the logo, right? So thank you so much, Megan. Real quick, who are the types of clients that you like to work with, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I love working with business leaders, HR leaders, and professionals that are looking for how to engage, retain, and attract that top talent. How do they develop their leaders, that leadership pipeline? How do they drive more oomph from their team and make sure that they really stay in alignment with their vision and values? So I have a website, eleaderexperience.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well. And my email is megan@eleaderexperience.com. I'd love to have a conversation about what you're experiencing, what your team is experiencing, and how we can really start to close that gaps so that you can move forward with an irresistible brand.
Love it, Megan. Thank you. Great way to close that out. This is the Irresistible Brand Podcast, and it's brought to you here by Doubletake Promotional Marketing. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Irresistible Brand Podcast. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Again, I'm Matt Deutschman from Doubletake Promotional Marketing, where we specialize in promotional products and branded merchandise with a focus on the strategic initiatives of client appreciation, referral generation, employee engagement and retention, and recruiting and onboarding. Organizations that execute those areas well create an irresistible brand. If you haven't checked it out yet, visit doubleTakeBrandBarometer.com for our quick 5-minute assessment to see how well your organization performs in those areas and get some advice on where you can improve and where you can leverage existing strengths. Our mission is to help you make your brand irresistible. See you again next time.